Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. In this part of our course, we are discussing the object relational DBMSs. As we have discussed before, that before moving to purely object-oriented DBMSs, two major approaches were adopted. The first approach was extending the relational data model, and we discussed that, and we also discussed the tools that followed this approach. The second approach is called the object relational DBMSs, and this is the thing that the major tools, major DBMSs, which were previously only the relational DBMSs, now they started including or offering the object-oriented feature. Why? Because the object orientation as a programming paradigm was so successful and its benefits were so much used, so much exploited, that the people were expecting that these features should also be available in the form of DBMSs. So all the major DBMSs that were previously just being called the relational DBMSs, now all of them, they are called the object relational DBMS. Why? Because sticking to the same basic relational data model and still being called the relational DBMSs, still offering the same relational features, now they have incorporated, now they have adopted the object-oriented features as well. So that is why they are called the object relational DBMSs. We will be studying this concept or this approach in this part of our course using the example of a major DBMS, and that DBMS is Oracle. We'll study Oracle and see what are the features that have been included in the Oracle that are basically the object-oriented feature. We'll see that the Oracle, even not the latest one, even some previous version of the Oracle, they were providing the object-oriented feature. So it means that this part of our course, we will be studying the object-oriented features offered in Oracle. So the focus of this part of our course is basically based on a book by an author, Rahayu, and the title of the book is Object-Oriented Oracle. So the book has got 7 or 8 chapters. The second chapter of this book that we are discussing nowadays, this chapter of the book covers all the features of the Oracle that are provided under the topic of the object orientation. So the second chapter is basically an overview of all the features, and next 3 or 4 chapters that we will be covering in this course, they discuss those topics in detail. So far basically we are reviewing the features, the object-oriented feature provided by the Oracle. So today we are discussing the methods. Methods means, because we know that when we talk about the object orientation, a class or an object, it has got 2 major parts. One is the state and one is the methods or behavior. So we have discussed the stored procedures, because Oracle provides 2 approaches to implement the methods. First is the stored procedures, which is a routine or a previous approach that was already supported by the Oracle, or that was called the stored procedures. So Oracle supports stored procedures of function, and these are the functions or procedures that are written in PLSQL in case of Oracle, or in some other programming language, and they are stored as a part of the schema. So this is not the topic of this course, so we will not discuss this stored procedure topic in detail, but the second approach that is supported by the Oracle regarding the implementation of methods is the member functions or member procedures. This concept, the member procedure, this has been included in Oracle as part of the object-oriented feature. The stored procedure is also stored in schema, and same is the case with the member procedure or member functions. But the main difference is that as the Oracle has included the type definition as a support for the object orientation. So to supplement that, Oracle also offers the member procedures. The difference is that the stored procedure or functions that were already there in Oracle, they are an independent thing. So the way we stored a table in the schema, the way we store other objects in the schema, likewise the stored procedure or stored function is stored in the schema as an independent thing, as an independent object. But when we talk about the member function or member procedure, they are a part of the type, because as we already know that the concept of type has been included as the part of the support for the object orientation. So the member procedure or member function, this is stored as a part of the type. So what we have already seen is that the type includes attributes, and in the terminology of the object orientation, we can say so far we have defined the state of the object, and using the member function or member procedure, we will be implementing the behavior of the object. That is a concept that is already there in the object orientation. So it means that to complete the concept of object orientation or the support of the object orientation, the Oracle also supports the concept of the member procedure or member function. And the difference between the stored function and the member function is that they are stored independently in the schema, and the member function or procedure, it is stored as a part of the type. Second thing is that the stored procedure or stored function, it is called independently. But when we talk about a member function or member procedure, it is called through an object of the particular type in which it was defined. And you must remember or easily compare it, and you can realize that it resembles the concept of the method call or the member function that is there in the object orientation, because when you define a function in a class, then you call that function through an object of that class type. Same is the case here. When you define a member procedure in a type, then you call that member function through an object of that type that you define in Oracle. And the second thing is that the object through which you call this member function, the state of that object is implicitly available to that function where you're within that function. So this is the resemblance with the concepts that we find in the object orientation in general, the object orientation that we use, that we exploit using any programming language. The same concepts, if not 100%, but to quite an extent, they are supported in the Oracle as we have been discussing. Now we see how we define a member function or procedure. On your screen now you can see this is basically the syntax for defining a member function or procedure. As you can see here that there is a type definition. Basically you are defining a type, and initially you define the attributes included in that type, and after that you give the signature of the member functions or procedure. And as you can see from this slide that while defining the type, you only give the signature of member function or member procedure. And as you can see that the syntax for this is that first of all you say member procedure, this you give as such, then you give the name of the procedure or function. This is obviously user defined. After that you give the parameters, the arguments, and the approach or the syntax for this is that first of all you give the name of the parameter, then you determine either the nature of this parameter is in, out or in, out. You will adopt any one of them. You will give any one of them. And as the name suggests, the in argument means that this argument or this parameter will only take a value into the procedure or function. The objective of including this particular parameter in the procedure signature is that it will take a parameter, a value inside the procedure. If you declare a parameter as out, it means that the objective of this parameter is only to get a value out of the procedure or function, and it does not take any value inside. And when you declare a parameter as in out, it means that this particular parameter will perform both objectives. It will take one value in, and also it will be used, or it can be used to take one value out of the procedure or function. And obviously, after mentioning the name and the nature in or out, then you determine the type of the parameter. So this is the syntax, or this is the approach to define, to give one parameter, and likewise you will give as many parameters as you need there, and after that you will simply close the signature of that procedure. Same is the syntax for defining a function. The only difference between the procedure signature and the function signature is that, because we know that function also returns a value, procedure does not return a value. It only performs something for which it has been defined, but it does not return a value. However, if we want to return a value through a procedure, we can do if we include one, two, or as many as we need parameters as out or in out. So this is the way to return some values from the procedure. But when we see the function returns the value by its name. It means that we have to give the type of the function as well. So if you see on your slide, you can see that at the end of the signature of the function, there is written return data type. Return is the reserved word that you will give here as such, and data type here that you are giving is the data type of the function. It means that this function will return this type of value. So this is the syntax of defining the member procedure or function. And as I told you before, that while defining the type, you will only give the signature of the member procedure or function. That is, the signature includes the name of the function or procedure and the arguments, parameters, and the types, and plus the return type in case of function. This is only included in the definition of the type. When we see the body or implementation of these member function and procedure, they are done independently, and that we'll study shortly. Now on this slide, you can see the format or syntax for defining the body of the member function or member procedure is given. And I told you that this is done independently. You will define first the type, in which you will give the attributes included and plus the member functions and procedures. And after that, when that type has been defined, after that you will define the body of the member function or member procedure. And here is basically the syntax of that activity. Here, as you can see, that create or replace type body. Here you are saying type body, and then you give the name of the object as, then again you give the same signature that you gave in the type definition, and then you give the begin. This is a reserved word that you'll give here as such. And after that, if you want to declare some local variables, you will declare before begin. You say declare, and you declare any local variable that you need here, and then you say begin, and from here the statements that are included in the body of the procedure or function, they're written here, and in this case you will use the PL/SQL statements. So this is how you define the member procedure. After the syntax of the procedure, there is given the syntax for defining a member function. This is exactly the same. The only difference is that because function returns a value, so you mentioned the return type is as additional thing in the signature, and in the same way there is body, and at the end you will give the return and the value that the function is returning. So this is basically the syntax for defining member procedure or member function. And as I told you before, that this is basically a further step, an additional step that has been offered by the Oracle to give an extra touch, you can say, or extra feeling or extra features of the object orientation. How they are written, how they are called and implemented, that we will study in the later topics. But so far, you need to know is that what is a stored function and what is a member function, and what is the difference between them, how do we write them, and how do we call them, and what are the features, what are their relative features. So far this is enough to know, and in the later topics we'll discuss them in detail. Then another feature that is associated in the object oriented systems with the members of a class, or you can say an object, and that is the visibility. Visibility means that where a particular member means either it is an attribute or a method, where that member is available, where you can access it. And generally three categories are associated with the visibility. One is public, private, and protected. Now, amazingly, the book or this particular reference mentions that Oracle supports these visibility options. But unfortunately, the particular version that we are using, let's say, that we can say the minimum version that supports all these things is Oracle 8 or Oracle 9. So we are using Oracle 9, but in the Oracle 9, I found that it does not support these things. So although public, private, protected, they are associated with the object orientation, but in this particular version of the Oracle, they are not supported. So we do not need to discuss them in detail. Then another thing is the method overriding, and we know that once a method has been defined in a class, and another class is derived from this class, so this method is inherited to the derived class. But we can redefine the same method in the derived class. This is called overriding. So the overriding is supported in Oracle, or we can say object-oriented Oracle. So in the following lectures, we will use the term object-oriented Oracle, yeah, object-oriented SQL. So the overriding is also supported in the object-oriented Oracle. Here, the chapter 2 of our book ends, and as I told you that this chapter gives an overview of the features that are supported in the object-oriented SQL or object-oriented Oracle. From the next chapter, we will discuss each of these chapters, each of these topics in details, and we'll see how we can implement these features in Oracle using SQL. And this discussion starts from chapter number 3. The approach that has been adopted in this book, and that will obviously follow in the coming topics and lectures, is that first they discuss the idea, or they mention the idea, and idea we know about the topics because we have been discussing these things. So first of all, they discuss the idea, they discuss the object-oriented feature, and then they mention the implementation. And for implementation, generally they adopt two approaches. One approach is that using or implementing a particular feature using the routine or original features of the SQL, or we can say using the traditional relational features, and implementing or giving the impression of the object-oriented feature. And secondly, they implement the same feature using the OO feature or OO extension that has been included in SQL and supported by the Oracle. So it means that our strategy will be that first we'll mention the particular feature, and then we'll mention both the approaches of implementation of that particular feature. The advantage of adopting this approach is that you will understand that how we can get an object-oriented feature in a relational DBMS. So from chapter number 3 and onward, we will adopt the same approach. First of all, the topic that is being discussed is the inheritance. And you know, inheritance is a very common and very prominent feature of the object orientation. And we do not need to discuss about that because we already know it. We have already discussed it. When we talk about the support for inheritance in Oracle or in object-oriented Oracle or SQL, then in this case, they support 3 types of inheritance. One of them is called union inheritance. Second one is the mutual exclusion inheritance. And third is the partition inheritance. So we will discuss these 3 types of inheritance one by one, and we'll see how it has been implemented or how it can be implemented using both these strategies that we have already said. That is, one is the traditional or original relational approach. Because when we say relational, it is relational. So using the relational, giving the impression of object orientation. So first of all, we see what is union inheritance. That type of inheritance where the subclasses they can share an object. What do we mean by share? It means that if we have a class hierarchy where there's a superclass and different subclasses, a particular object can be of the superclass type and any of the subclasses type, or it may belong to more than one subclasses. I'll explain this with an example. For example, here you can see class hierarchy has been defined where on the top we have got a person, which is a superclass or supertype, and it has got 3 subclasses. One is staff, student, and faculty. If there is union inheritance, this means that an object can be of class person, or we can say an object can belong to the class person. In that case, it means that it does not belong to any of the subclasses. It means that it will have only the features or the members that have been defined in the superclass. Second is that it can belong to any of the subclasses. For example, a particular object can be of type staff, it can be of type student, or of type faculty. Thirdly, an object can belong to more than one subclasses as well. So we can say an object can belong to the staff class and also to the student, or it can belong to the student class and to the faculty class, or even to all 3 of them. So it means that an object can be of more than one class types. See, why would an object belong to more than one subclasses or to none of the subclasses? See, this is not something that is defined by you, developer, or by the designer, or let's say by the DBA. This is something that exists there in the system. The system that you are building, this is defined, or this is already implemented there. This already is there. This already exists there. So you as a designer have observed it, you have seen it, and then you see, okay, if I have to model this system, this environment, so in this environment, I have to define, I have to implement the union inheritance. Why? Because I can find that if you see a person, if you ask him, what is your role here? Are you a staff member here or student? He may say that I am a staff member as well as a student. So it means that a particular person, a particular object can belong to more than one subclasses. He is playing more than one roles in an organization. So it means that if you adopt the union inheritance, if you decide to implement the union inheritance somewhere, it is not your decision. Basically, it is your professional duty. Basically, you have to implement it like that, because if you want to implement a system correctly, the way it exists. So you will implement the same thing that already exists there. So explaining all this thing is that you should not be criticizing or be amazed about this, that how is it possible or it cannot happen. This is not your job to think that it can happen or not. It happens in the real systems. So the features that are supported, that are provided by any system, are for you to implement a real world situation that is already there. Because you cannot change the rules, you cannot change the systems, you have to implement them. So this is the situation that exists somewhere and you have to implement it. So anyway, we were discussing what is union inheritance. So I think so far you have got the idea what is meant by the union inheritance. Now we'll see how we can implement it in Oracle or in object-oriented Oracle using both the approaches, the original relational approach. When we say original relational approach, we mean by using the features that are there as the relational features. And when we say the object-oriented approach, then we mean the features that have been additionally included in Oracle or SQL in order to support the object orientation. So first of all, we see how to implement the union inheritance using the relational approach. Here, basically, we use the same old traditional primary foreign key concept. So what we do is that, first of all, we have to define, in this particular example, when we say there's a one superclass and three subclasses, in this particular case, we will have to define 4 tables. Every class being represented by one table, one thing. Secondly, what will happen that we will obviously define a primary key in the superclass, which is the person, and the tables that we have created for the subclasses. What we will do, we will use the same primary key of the superclass of the table representing the superclass. We will use the same primary key as the primary key of all the 3 tables that we have created for the implementation of the subclasses. 2 things. And third thing is that we will declare the primary keys of all these 3 tables representing the subclasses. So we call them the subclass tables. Although this is something confusing, but still, just to make it short. So the subclass tables, they contain the primary key of the superclass table as the primary key. At the same time, we declare it as the foreign key. So what happens is that when we declare the same primary key in the superclass table and the subclass table, it means that we can have one instance each in the superclass and the subclass. It means that there cannot be more than one instances of a particular tuple or object in any of the tables. If we have one row for an object in the superclass table, then obviously if we can have at most one row representing an object in the subclass tables. Secondly, when we have declared the foreign key, when we have declared the primary key in the subclass tables as the foreign key as well, it means that we can have an object or a tuple representing an object in the subclass tables only if that object or an object with that ID already exists in the superclass table. इसका मतलब ये हुआ कि if you enter, for example, when we say a student, we want to represent a student and a student object. So the properties or the attributes of the student that have been defined in the person class, first we will have to enter those attributes in the superclass table. Okay, when, for example, let's say we say name, father name, address, ID, and obviously the primary key. So we enter these 5 or 6 attributes that have been defined in the superclass table. First we enter them there, and then, and only then, we can enter the remaining attributes. For example, if we have defined attributes like CGPA or program name or fee, for example, if we have defined these attributes in the student subclass, and obviously they have been defined in the subclass table student, so we can enter the data in the subclass table only when we have entered the data in the superclass table, because we have declared the primary key of the subclass table as the foreign key. So what happens is that you cannot enter a student unless you have not entered some data in the person superclass table. So in this way, you implement a superclass, subclass, or inheritance. Why? Because when we see a particular student object in this student subclass table, we know that although this table includes only, let's say, 3 attributes like fee, CGPA, or program name, but we know that this table inherits data from the person superclass table. So the remaining attributes that are basically defined in the person table, they must be there. They are there. And likewise, if we want to include, if we want to enter a staff object, then again the same thing will happen. First, you have to enter the data in the person superclass table, and the remaining attributes that are associated with the staff, they will be entered in the staff subclass table. So in this way you can feel that we have implemented the concept of inheritance. How? That the specific attributes that are associated with the student, with the staff, with the faculty, they will be entered in their specific table, but the person will contain, the person superclass table, it will contain the attributes of all these 3 subclass types. For example, it will contain the attributes that are for a student or faculty or staff. So this gives us an impression of inheritance. Although it is not truly inheritance, but the thing is that we get the impression of that, because as we know in the inheritance, the concept is that the hierarchy is defined in such a way that the superclass contains the properties of that are common with all the subclasses. The same thing is happening here. The table that you have created against the superclass that we call the subclass table, that contains the attributes that are common with all these 3 tables. So what happens is that whether an object belongs to the staff, faculty, or the student, its common attribute that they are sharing, that all of them have common, they will be always there in the person table. And the beauty of the concept is that you cannot enter the data into the student or the staff or the faculty unless you enter the data into the person table. And how it has been achieved? It has been achieved by using the same primary key in all 4 of them, one thing. But mind it, this is not enough. You have to do the second thing as well, which is that you declare the primary key in all 3 subclass tables as the foreign key as well. So these two jointly give you this impression. How and why? See, the primary key, when you declare the primary key, the same primary key in all these 4 tables, it means that you cannot have same value of this key in the same table. If it means that you can have only one record or one tuple or one row or one object in this case with one primary key value. This is one thing, uniqueness. And the beauty is that when you declare it as a foreign key in the subclass tables, then it means that you have to enter the data first in the superclass table. This gives you impression of the inheritance. Now, see, there is another technicality. What? That by definition, foreign key can have the null value. You know it. Foreign key have the null value. But in this case, when you declare the foreign key in the subclass table as the primary key as well, now the primary key constraint won't let this attribute to have the null value. See, the primary key constraint will restrict this attribute to have the null value, one thing. And second thing, the foreign key constraint, it won't let this attribute to have the value that is not already there in the superclass table. This is the beauty of the concept, that combining these two constraints, you give an impression of the thing that you are implementing inheritance. So this is the approach that we use to give the concept of inheritance, the feature of inheritance, using the relational approach. I mean, using the relational feature. If you analyze what we have studied so far, is that we have not discussed any feature that is non-relational, and there is nothing new here. You have already studied all these things in the relational databases, and the only thing is that we have combined those features in such a way, in such a combination, that it gives us the impression of a new word, which is basically object orientation. Now, the second approach, implementing the inheritance using the OAuth features newly included in the Oracle or Oracle SQL. They have defined a keyword, and that is under. And as you can see on your slide, here what they have done is that they define a type. See, in the previous approach, we did not discuss anything about the type. We just used the concept of tables, and that is it. Here, what we have done, first of all, we define the types. So when we say, if we want to implement the same scenario that we discussed before, that we have one superclass and three subclasses, in this case, what we'll do, first of all, we will have to define a type for the superclass, and let's say we call it the person type. And at the end of the definition of this class, we will write not final. These are the keywords that are required there. This is a part of the syntax. So we define the type for the superclass, and at the end we write not final. Then we define the type for each subclass. And as you can see here, that when we define the subclass type, we say create or replace, for example, type student type and under person type. When we say under, this is a new keyword or new feature that has been defined there. This basically means inheritance. When you say under a superclass type name, that class inherits all the members defined in the superclass type. And then obviously here when you're defining a type, you gave under and the class type name. This will inherit all the members, and then you can define the additional or new members that are associated with this particular type. So in this way, you define the types for all the subclasses that you have defined in your hierarchy. In our example, what we'll do, we'll define the type for the superclass, and then we'll define 3 types for the subclasses, and for each of the subclasses, we'll say under the person type. So under inherits all the properties from the super type, and then the respective specific attributes of the subtypes. When we have done this, what we will do, we'll also define the tables for all these 4 types. As you can see on your screen, for example, when you define the table for the person type and at the same time you define the primary key of the table as well, because you do not define the constraint in the type, you define them in the table. So likewise, you define tables for all these four types. Now, we were saying that this is a union inheritance. It means that an object can belong to either none of the subclasses, or it can belong to more than one subclasses. So what happens in this case is that when you want to enter an object, for example, and you want, for example, if it is of let's say only student type, for example, then we have a specific table for the student. So what we'll do, we'll enter the data in the student table. And mind it, when defining the type for the student, we define only attributes that are specific for the student, but it has also inherited the attributes from the supertype. So when we see the table of the student, and it includes both the attributes that have been defined in the student type itself, plus those that have been inherited from the person type. So if an object is of student type, then we will enter the data in the student table only. If an object is let's say of student and as well as of faculty type, for example, in this case we will enter the data in two tables. One is the student table and other is the faculty table. Now, what you might have realized here is that there is a bit of wastage, in the sense that when we talk about that the person is of type the student and of type faculty as well, both are independent tables. So when we are entering the data in both of them, then we'll have to duplicate the data that has been inherited from the superclass type. So obviously this is a drawback, you can say, but this is how it has been implemented, because this is a union inheritance. Person can be of more than one types. So because it is being implemented in relational DBMS, so this is a drawback that you'll have to face, that the attributes that are being inherited from both the things, they will have to be stored twice. So obviously there could be problem of consistency and all that, but if you have to manage this thing through the application. But this is how the union inheritance is implemented here. However, if a student, if a particular object is of only person type, then obviously you have a table for the person type as well. So you will enter the data for that object only in the person table, and this data will not go in any of the other subclass tables. See, this thing might be disturbing you, that we have to duplicate the data, and obviously it can create the issue of consistency. That is, if we want to enter an object who is a student and as well as faculty, we have to duplicate the common attributes, and maybe while entering the data we may make some mistake there. So that you can manage through the application. See, if we are implementing an object-oriented system, there the concept of encapsulation is there, and in encapsulation you do not give direct access to the data. You give access through methods, through member procedure functions. So you can manage this thing through the functions of procedure that you will write to manipulate the data. So when we'll study the methods, we'll discuss this issue there, and you can manage it properly. There's not much of a problem. Here, so far, what we have studied is that what is union inheritance, and how can we implement it using the original relational features or concept, and using the newly introduced features into the object-oriented Oracle. Next, we discuss the second type of inheritance that has been supported, that has been included in Oracle, and that is mutual exclusive or mutual exclusion inheritance. As the name suggests, in this case or in this type of inheritance, an object can belong to any one of the subclasses. it is different from the union inheritance in the sense that in the union inheritance, an object can belong to more than one subclasses. But in this case, in the mutual exclusion inheritance, one object can belong to any one of the subclasses, but at the same time, it may not belong to any of the subclasses. It means if we describe the same thing in our own example, we can say that an object can be of person type, and in that case, it does not belong to any of the subclasses below. I mean, neither it is, we are talking about a person who is neither a student, faculty, or staff. Or it will belong to any one of the subclasses, that is, it will be either a student, a faculty, or a staff. It will not happen here that one object belongs to more than one subclass. So this is called mutual exclusion inheritance. So again, in the previous style, we'll see how to implement this type of inheritance using the original relational approach or using the new features in the object-oriented oracle. So first, using the relational approach. In this approach, like before, we will create 4 tables for 4 classes, 1 superclass and 3 subclasses. One thing. Second, we will use the same approach, that is, that we declare the primary key of the superclass table as the primary key in all 3 subclass tables. The same thing. One new thing is that we include a type attribute, or we can say an attribute, to denote the type of a particular object, and that attribute will be included in the superclass table, that is the table that we have created for the superclass, and that is the person table. We will include this attribute in the person table. The objective of this attribute is that for one particular object, we will store this thing, that what is the type of this particular object that we find in the person table. Because as we have already discussed, that any object that belongs to any of the subclasses, the common attributes for that object will be stored in the person table. Any object that we store in any of these tables, first of all, it will be stored in the person table. So we define an attribute, we include an attribute to denote the type of a particular object, and we impose a check on this attribute, that this attribute can have any 4 of the values. What are the 4 values? 3 values that denote the type of a particular object. For example, the 3 subclasses, it can be either a student, a faculty, or staff. So the legal or allowed values for this attribute are 4. One is the one of the 3 values, one of the 3 subclass types, and 4th is the null. Null represents a particular object that does not belong to any of the 3 subclasses. This is represented by giving the null value to this type attribute, and if a particular object belongs to any one of the subclasses, and now in this case we are sure that an object can be any one of the classes type. So it means that if an object is a student, then we find the common attribute for that object in the person table, and the type attribute contains the value student. That will tell us, that will guide us to go to the student table, where we will find the remaining attributes of this particular object. So once again, what we will do, that we also declare the primary keys of the subclass tables as the foreign key as well, so that we can enter only those values in the subclass tables that have already been entered in the superclass table. So this is how we implement the mutual exclusion inheritance using the original relational features. Next time we'll discuss how to implement this thing using the enhanced or new features of the object-oriented oracle. Thank you very much.